Hey guys, it's Robbie. I'm coming back at you with another YouTube video. So, heavy metal. It certainly is a very interesting genre, to say the least. It's also my favorite genre, although I will admit it can be a bit abrasive for beginners. And if the first metal anybody listens to is something like, say, Infant Annihilator, they'll probably be turned off. There are lots of albums that, in all honesty, would be more appropriate for someone who's getting into metal for the first time. Here are 4 of them. This is 4 great beginner metal albums. Let's check it out. First off, we have one of the most well-known albums in the history of music. I mean, it sold 25 million albums, so clearly it did something right. This album is still one of the most polarizing releases in the history of metal, mainly due to the context behind its release. Metallica started off as a thrash metal band with fast, aggressive, and progressive, complex song structures, but they ditched that sound on this album for a more simplistic, straight-to-the-point sound. Some people love this album while other people hate it for being, in their eyes, a sellout record. If you've seen my previous video, you know my thoughts on the phrase sellout. And while it is far more accessible than anything else Metallica had released up to that point, it's still a great fucking record. Anyone who thinks otherwise is high, honestly. I mean, you not only have Enter Sandman, which is a great song despite it being played to death on the radio, but you also have The Unforgiven, The God That Failed, My Friend of Misery, Nothing Else Matters, Wherever I May Roam, Sad But True. The list goes on. I also have to give credit to this album as, unlike the predecessor, the widely loved And Justice for All, the bass guitar is at least somewhat audible in the mix on this record. As a bass player, this really pleases me. This is also, for most people, the first heavy metal that they've ever heard, or at least it was for me. So I have to give it some kudos for kind of getting a lot of people into metal in the first place. This is a great album. What else can I really say? Up next, at number 2, arguably the first heavy metal album ever. A lot of people might feel inclined to go with Paranoid when it comes to all-time great Black Sabbath albums. However, I have a soft spot for their debut based just on how immeasurably groundbreaking it was. While not nearly as heavy as stuff that is released now in heavy metal, for its time, it was so extreme with its slow, evil riffs and apocalyptic imagery. This album was truly unlike anything else that had been released at the time, and a lot of critics just couldn't stand it. Lester Bangs, a writer for the Rolling Stone, described the album as just like Cream, but worse. And Robert Christgau of the Village Voice said that it was the worst of the counterculture. Thankfully, not everyone agreed with those idiots, as it developed such an intense cult following that Black Sabbath felt confident enough to release their follow-up album, the widely loved Paranoid, within a year of their debut, which you really don't see anymore in modern metal music, or just music in general. One of the album's best features, Geezer Butler's bass playing, actually came to be because of his inexperience at his instrument. He had started off as a guitar player, but switched to bass due to Tony Iommi's desire to be the band's sole guitarist. He said in an interview, "Back then, the bass player was supposed to do all these melodic runs, but I didn't know how to do that because I'd been a guitarist, so all I did was follow Tony's riff. That made the sound heavier." Clearly it was a good decision. This album was actually recorded in a single day, fun fact. Tony Iommi said about the recording process, "We thought, we have 2 days to do it, and one of the days is mixing, so we played live. Ozzy Osbourne was singing at the same time. We just put him in a separate booth and off we went. We never even had a second run of most of the stuff." To close things out, I just want to say this. The title track of the album, which is also the opening track, is the greatest way to begin a discography in the history of music. Prove me wrong. Next up is an album that might surprise some people. Silence in the storm. Now, Trivium is my absolute favorite band, and this is easily their most accessible release, so I wanted to include it, even though there are admittedly lots of other albums I could have chosen, but I wanted to mention some albums that I feel aren't mentioned a lot when it comes to beginner metal music that really should be mentioned. Now, Trivium songs traditionally feature complex song structures, soaring and crushing guitar riffs, and a mixture of sung and screamed vocals. But this album took a different path. This album was incredibly polarizing amongst fans when it first came out, due to the fact that it was the first, and as of now, the only Trivium album to feature no screamed vocals of any kind. Trivium did this not out of preference, but really out of necessity. Shortly before the writing process began, singer Matt Hafey blew out his voice due to using an incorrect screaming technique and was left unable to do harsh vocals. They were unsure as to whether or not he would ever come back at full strength, so they had only clean vocals on his album just to be safe. Me personally, I hated this album when I first listened to it because it was just so different from anything else they had put out at that point. But I've since learned to love it. I kind of realized that, you know, their old albums are always going to be there. I'll always have them. And, you know, it's still a great album despite its lack of screaming. And they did eventually bring screaming back, so that's good. Great songs on this album include the title track, Until the World Goes Cold, Blind Leading the Blind, and The Ghost That's Haunting You. Yeah, even if you're not a beginner metalhead, you should still check this album out because it is still really incredible. Finally, from one of the most unnecessarily hated metal bands in modern music. This is an album that I bet is unlike anything you'd ever heard before. Death Heaven managed to mix the shrieked vocals and fast trend picking of black metal with the heavy reverb and almost atmospheric, dreamlike texture of shoegaze music. And let me tell you, the results are like pleasure to the ears. I chose this album mainly because while it is really beautiful and meditative to listen to, it also has moments of brutality and screaming, so it really lets you know what metal is without going full out at you. I first listened to this album when it was a rainy, cloudy day outside, and I gotta tell you, that was the perfect setting to listen to this record. I know Death Heaven get a lot of hate for being hipster black metal, and while people say that, they aren't wrong, but there is a lot more of Death Heaven's music than just being hipsters who like black metal. The layering and reverb on the guitars of this album has a hypnotizing effect that I honestly have yet to hear on any other album done to such a degree. This album would be great to listen to if you're already a fan of like alternative, experimental noise rock music. You know, bands like Radiohead, Sonic Youth, or My Bloody Valentine, shit like that. And if you like bands with richly textured sonic landscapes, you'll probably like this record. It is a great album, what else can I really say? So those were 4 great albums to get you into the awesome world that is heavy metal. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends, especially if they haven't really gotten into metal music yet. I'm sure this video would be a huge help to them. And you know, even if you're already into metal, you should probably still listen to these albums because they are still incredible anyways. Although, if you are into metal, you've probably listened to some stuff off of this. I mean, they are very popular albums. I'll see you next week. I'll have another video for you then. In the meantime, stay awesome, I guess. I don't know, I don't have a script for this.